Radically different programming for radically different times.
The population is beginning to participate instead of just accepting the hammer blows.
The place where the people who say it can't be done take a back seat to the people who are doing it.
There's a crack that is starting to metastasize. We're starting to see this with people recognizing the true power in techniques like withholding their labor.
Questioning the past to contextualize today.
What is wrong with teaching about what really happened in this country?
It's the Laura Flanders Show.
The magic movement moments are when all things align and there is a very broad awakening and people take action.
Welcome. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, joining you from North Carolina, where we've been looking at the local roots of the January 6th insurrection in Washington, D.C. In earlier episodes, we've looked at the growth of paramilitary training facilities here and the militarized power of partisan sheriffs and police. This time, we're looking at the long history and present of anti-democratic election law, and a legal case that could throw all sorts of elections into the kind of chaos we saw after 2020. Ostensibly, the historic decision by the North Carolina Supreme Court is about gerrymandering, but the impulses behind the case date back generations and are all about maintaining white power. What's at stake and why does it matter? What does the pushback look like? We're here to find out.
We are following breaking news in Raleigh with major impacts on voting in North Carolina.
Our Republican Supreme Court has abdicated its responsibility, taking power away from the people and giving it to an out-of-control, unaccountable Republican supermajority legislature.
At stake is whether the legislature will have unbridled discretion in redistricting legislative district without oversight from that state's Supreme Court.
We must fix the current inequalities in our election system. We have to move forward, not backwards. And if we don't, our democracy is at risk.
At stake here is really full citizenship, full participation in our governance and in our communities by all members.
Over the last 2 decades, as North Carolina has become increasingly urban and diverse, Republicans here have done everything they can to hang on to power, whether or not they have the support of the majority of the populace. With unlimited amounts of campaign cash, extreme gerrymandering, and the end of federal oversight over voting rights, they've been able to secure a virtual lock on the General Assembly, even though North Carolina is a closely divided state. Josh Stein is the state attorney general.
I was elected first in 2016 and then re-elected in 2020. And the job of Attorney General is really to be the people's lawyer, to represent the people of North Carolina, to protect the people of North Carolina. We fight for people's fundamental rights, their rights to live their lives free of discrimination, no matter who they are, and the right to vote, which is, in our democracy, the most important right.
North Carolinians vote roughly 50-50 Republican and Democrat, with African Americans voting heavily Democratic and the Republican vote heavily white. Yet Republicans enjoy a veto-proof supermajority in both houses of the state government. How did that come about?
Because they have abused the line-drawing process, which happens every decade after a census, in order to manipulate it so that they get more power. They favor certain voters, their voters, and they discriminate against other voters who may disagree with them. And in the process, they make some people's votes worth more than others. And that is antithetical to what democracy is supposed to be. This legislature has been elected time and time again under unconstitutional maps, and that is problematic. So it's not a surprise they have these powers, because that's what they've done, is manipulate it to their advantage.
A case in point, in 2016, Democrats won 46% of the vote in North Carolina's congressional races, but only managed to win 3 out of the state's 13 seats. The U.S. Supreme Court eventually ruled that the maps used in those elections were racially gerrymandered and had to be rewritten.
Under the new maps, our congressional delegation in Washington today is 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans in a 50-50 state. Now, they're not happy with that because they want to be able to make whatever decision they want ignoring the will of the people, and that's wrong.
While racial gerrymandering has been declared unconstitutional, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that claims of unconstitutional partisan gerrymandering, writing maps to benefit one party over another, is a matter for the states to adjudicate. How they do that is the question at the heart of the case decided on April 28th. Hilary Klein is senior counsel for voting rights for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. She helped argue the case at the North Carolina Supreme Court.
In 2021, after the last U.S. Census was released, North Carolina's legislatures redrew all of our electoral maps. And when they did that, they intentionally drew extreme partisan gerrymanders. We know that because our client, Common Cause, along with other plaintiffs, sued in court contending these were illegal partisan gerrymanders. And that case went to trial in January of 2022, and the trial court unanimously held that all of the maps were extreme partisan gerrymanders, intentional gerrymanders, that would be non-responsive. If there was an election, it would be non-responsive to the will of the voters.
In their April 28th decision, a newly elected Republican majority on the North Carolina Supreme Court not only reinstated maps that their Democratic predecessors on the same court had found to be gerrymandered, but argued that only the General Assembly, not the courts or the executive branch, had any authority over redistricting. They also reversed two other decisions, one voiding a discriminatory voter ID law and another that restored the right to vote for those convicted of felonies after their release.
We're all supposed to have the right to vote, but we have to have those votes mean something for each vote to be equal, and they're not when there is partisan gerrymandering. We can't underestimate how damaging that is to our long-term health. So there's a problem, there's a sickness, and that means we have to treat it, and we have to address it, and we have to underscore to people that their vote does count, and that it will be heard, and that they can vote safely and securely. And that is our collective work.
This collective work is bolstered by a long history of activism in North Carolina, including the pioneering civil rights work of legal scholar Pauli Murray. The following clip is from a 2021 documentary, My Name is Pauli Murray, in which you'll hear from, among others, the late U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The full film's available on Amazon Prime. Following that, we'll pick up Murray's story with the executive director of the Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice in Durham, Angela M. Thorpe.
There are some people who now argue that you cannot teach American history without teaching about Pauli Murray.
Pauli was a writer, a lawyer, a priest, a poet. Pauli was a feisty woman.
My whole personal history has been a struggle to meet standards of excellence in a society which has been dominated by the ideas that blacks were inherently inferior to whites and women were inherently inferior to men.
Pauli is what we might describe today as gender non-conforming, but that same space did not exist for them in the 20th century. Pauli was a legal scholar. They were thinking differently and futuristically about legal concepts in ways that their counterparts and even their mentors were unable to. That is what laid the groundwork for their impact for civil rights.
Hilary Klein, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Senior Counsel on Voting Rights.
Pauli Murray is hugely influential to anybody doing civil rights in North Carolina, and I think actually across the whole country. Murray was the intellectual architect of the civil rights movement.
In the early 20th century, Murray, a queer black woman whom many today would call non-binary or trans, challenged her contemporaries to apply the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause to cases of discrimination on the basis of gender or race. Laughed at the time, her arguments were eventually used in the litigation that overturned segregation, with implications for education, transportation, employment, voting, and even on the drafting of the Equal Rights Amendment, or ERA. U.S. democracy, Murray argued, required applying the Constitution to real life in a way that considered not just the behaviors of individuals, but also the structures and rules of a society that effectively discriminate. A right to vote, Murray might say, isn't worth much if because of gerrymandering, that vote has no impact. Civil rights attorney Irving Joyner has been involved in over 30 years of litigation around voting rights. He helped argue Thornburg v. Jingles, which laid out the grounds on which gerrymandering could be challenged in North Carolina.
I'm a professor of law at North Carolina Central University School of Law, but I'm a child of the civil rights movement. I grew up in Jim Crow segregation. Raised here in North Carolina, where I experienced the worst of Jim Crow. And I have watched the struggle to confront Jim Crow, and happily I've been eagerly engaged in those efforts since high school.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. Today we are bringing you the latest in our series of reports on the fight for democracy in North Carolina. This time, we're looking at the ways that white power elites have used anti-democratic election laws and extreme gerrymandering to hold on to power in a changing state. And a legal case Moore v. Harper that is currently before the Supreme Court. Next, law professor Irving Joyner shares the long, nasty history of suppressing the African-American vote, a history that goes back to the end of Reconstruction in North Carolina. You can watch this special report at our website, or catch our show on over 300 public television stations across the country, as well as on community radio. Go to lauraflanders.org for some help navigating all the ways to watch and listen. And while you're there, sign up for our weekly newsletter. It includes invaluable information on all our bonus content, including uncut full interviews and my regular commentaries. Our special report on deciding the fate of democracy in North Carolina continues. But first, here's Wings by Terry Callier from his album Hidden Conversations, released on Mr. Bongo Records.
Like a cloud in the sky or a bird on the wing, like the hope in your heart that real freedom can bring, like the words you recall in a song that you sing, or the sound in your skull like a bell when it rings, like a dream you might see with frightening things, like a magnet attracts, like a memory clings, and the days of our lives are like beads on a string, and there's one common end for both beggars and kings, beginning and end, the first, the last, one step towards the future and two in the past, and it seems like a blur because it goes by so fast, and memories are fading like leaves on the grass, and images seen in a dark looking glass, when the pattern is set and the die has been cast, there's a test for success and you guess, but alas, one turn of the wheel and you're out on your ass, and here
The recent decision by the North Carolina Supreme Court doesn't come from nowhere. Joyner says it's a product of years of work to undermine the power of the African-American vote. Can you trace for us the trajectory of African-American voting rights in this state?
1868 was a pivotal year in North Carolina. It was the beginning of Reconstruction and the beginning of a promise to newly enfranchised individuals of color in this state, those who were formerly enslaved, and those who were so-called free Africans, who thought that the Constitution and the cry for democracy meant them too, and they fought to get into, during Reconstruction, the ability to help govern the state. All of that came crushing down in 1898 in North Carolina, where the overthrow or coup d'etat in Wilmington resulted in the removal of African Americans from every elected position in the state of North Carolina, and the inability legally for African Americans to be able to register and vote. And that situation continued until 1968, even following the enactment of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. But in 1968, Henry Fry became the first African American to be elected to the North Carolina General Assembly, which was a big moment here in the state. But it was really after Jingles versus Thornburg that we had double digits in the number of African Americans who were elected in the state, and that number grew from 1982 right on up until 2010, where at that time you had in excess of 30 African Americans in the North Carolina General Assembly, and all of that came crushing down in 2010 with the elections of Republicans to take control of the North Carolina General Assembly. And their first order of business was to attack the success that we had in building up African American political power.
And just to put a pin in it, 2010 was 2 years after a pretty significant election.
It was amazing. In 2008, we had the election of Barack Obama, the first African American and only African American to be elected as president. In North Carolina, percentage-wise, African Americans voted for the first time in history at a level that surpassed the voting percentage of whites in the state. And that was a glorious day to be able to look at those numbers, to see that the participation of African Americans had skyrocketed in this state. And then to turn around 2 years later, where that number plummeted. People were still celebrating the election of Barack Obama that allowed for this Republican upsurge to come in and take over in North Carolina. And since that time, we have been battling to fight to get our position back and to encourage our people to get back out and vote and participate, because there are benefits in having your voice heard and being able to exercise that power within the political process.
After the 2010 census, Republicans redrew voting maps such that they were able to win a supermajority in both chambers of the General Assembly and the governor's office. With that concentrated power, they advanced extremist bills that in many ways became models for other states, such as Amendment 1, which outlawed marriage equality, and the so-called bathroom bill, one of the first in the nation to put a target on trans rights. Serena Sebring of Blueprint, North Carolina, was active in opposition during those years.
When I think about what we're up against now, I can draw a direct line back to 2012 and the question of whether our families as queer families were legitimate. Because what's at stake are a number of things that many people take for granted, rights that folks take for granted. For example, the right to vote, which is currently being considered at our state legislature in a number of ways. Should we have literacy tests? Should people who are formerly incarcerated have the right to vote? So the stripping away, or at least the potential for stripping away of established rights for communities of color or communities that are marginalized in other ways, feels very much consistent with the experience that I've had as an organizer in North Carolina since 2012. I have seen extremism grow in North Carolina over the time that I have been here. There's no question that if we look at what are some of the threats to democracy now, we see a whole new type of threat that comes from extremists that are focused on, anything from women's rights to LGBTQ people's rights to, the kinds of impulses that led 9 busloads of North Carolinians up to D.C. for the insurrection of 2021. The extremism in this state has grown across this time. There's not a check or a balance on the extremism that might come from a representative government because, in part, of gerrymandering.
Checks and balances matter. That's why they were written into the Constitution. School groups learn all about why they're so important when they come to visit the Capitol, like this one here in Raleigh, North Carolina. The U.S. Supreme Court currently has a chance to weigh in on the matter of who has authority over drawing election maps in a case out of North Carolina called Moore v. Harper. If Moore v. Harper is decided for the plaintiffs, one branch would be stripped of all oversight, and tour guides might have to change their script.
In public comments in 2021,
Hilary Klein, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, Senior Counsel on Voting Rights.
North Carolinians across this state from all sides of the political spectrum resoundingly rejected gerrymandering. They told the legislature, we do not want any more gerrymandering. And that's because they suffered a lot in the last cycle. There were 3 different congressional maps in the last, decade, from 2010 to 2020 alone, several litigations. And voters are tired of that. They want consistency in representation. They want to know who their elected representatives are and accountability for those elected representatives. North Carolinas do not want this gerrymandering. And I think that's an important point, because what the legislatures are trying to do here is not the people's business. It is their own political entrenchment.
Angela Thorpe is the executive director of the Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice.
Pauli was raised in the Jim Crow South in Durham, North Carolina. Pauli's family was affected by racial terror violence in a myriad of ways. Pauli describes even as a child the night terrors that her grandmother would have because of her past experiences being harassed by members of the Ku Klux Klan in Orange County, North Carolina. And so this is certainly a reality. But in addition, Pauli was raised with what she describes as a great deal of racial pride, right? She came from a strong people, a dignified people. We do know Pauli was queer, had a long time loving relationship with a partner who was a woman, but again, self-described as a he-she personality, sought hormone therapy, had a lot of questions and curiosity about their own gender and their own gender identity. But we also know that Pauli was a critical advocate for women, for Black women, Black working class women, and was a thought leader and a legal scholar around women's rights. And so, again, you're going to hear me use she, they interchangeably.
Rejected by the University of North Carolina in 1938 because, as an African American, they'd not received enough education in high school, Murray went on to graduate first of her class and the only woman in her year at Howard Law School. Rejected by Harvard because of her gender, Murray went on to become the first African American to receive a doctorate from Yale Law School. In their most powerful poem, Dark Testament, Murray wrote that hope is a crushed stalk between clenched fingers, a song in a weary throat. Give me a song of hope, she wrote, and a world where I can sing it, a song of kindliness and a country where I can live it. The U.S. South, Murray wrote, is the testing ground for U.S. democracy.
I think Murray really taught us that we have to bring life to the language in our foundational documents. They made promises of equal protection. They made promises to the people of this country, and it is our job to bring life to that and to have those words meet the challenges of the day. That's what Murray did in thinking very creatively about how equal protections could be used to combat sex and race-based discrimination, and I think we have to continue that fight.
I think Pauli Murray would be incredibly concerned with the ways in which legislatures in states across the U.S. are working to strip people, particularly Black people, of their voting rights. I think Pauli would be incredibly challenged with what we're seeing around Black people's access to the polls. And so, again, I think Pauli would have a mix of emotions, but likely a great deal of concern.
We have an unfortunate history in North Carolina.
Josh Stein, Attorney General, North Carolina.
There's no denying it. In fact, we have to stare at it head on so that we're aware of what has happened to ensure that we are not pursuing that path at all. I mean, we had the grandfather clauses, we had poll taxes, we had literacy tests. All of these things were tools by white people in power to keep black people from participating fully. But as recently as the last decade, the U.S. Supreme Court majority concluded that we had engaged in racial gerrymandering here in North Carolina, discrimination that penalized people for being black. That is wrong. But in North Carolina, party and race are so closely aligned that if you allow partisan gerrymandering, inevitably you are discriminating against black voters, and that's offensive. You know, we've had this incredible, healthy, long-term democracy, but because we've had things in the past, there's never a guarantee for the future. The past does not guarantee future success. Future success is determined by you and me and every person in this state, and our commitment to doing everything we can now to reinvigorate our democracy, and that's a job on all of us.
Serena Sebring, Executive Director, Blueprint, North Carolina.
Pauli Murray is an inspiration and a hero in Durham. I mean, I think many of us are so excited to come to Durham and learn that there was a visionary like Pauli Murray, who before it was sexy, before many of us had even understood her name, could speak to a kind of governance and a kind of community participation in it that we are still working towards.
North Carolina is rich with people that we can look to who made an impact, made a difference in the direction of our state, but also the whole country. And I'm blessed that I'm related to one of them, my father, Adam, but he and his law partners, Julius Chambers, James Ferguson, but there are other civil rights leaders, Pauli Murray, who was fighting not only the fight on a race, but on gender and sexuality. And so they faced a much tougher fight, honestly, I think, than we do, because it's hard to remember. But, I mean, my dad's law office was firebombed, burned to the ground. Chambers' car was bombed twice. People were killed. And we have to take inspiration from those folks and know that they were able to persevere through bleak times and tough political times where, those in power didn't want to give it up. But they went and grabbed what was fair and right, and we have to keep moving forward.
Success breeds forgetfulness.
Irving Joyner, Professor of Law, North Carolina Central University School of Law.
You get used to the success and you forget the underpinnings, those things necessary to get you into that position in the first place. And we have to restore that notion and begin to help people to understand that a democracy is something in which all of the people are able to participate.
We are willing to put in the elbow grease and the ground game to address the problems at the local level, to look deeply into 100 counties and to say it's not just Raleigh, it's not just Charlotte, it's not even just Durham that matters, but it is Columbus County, it is Pasquotank County, it is all of the people of North Carolina who must be welcomed into a democracy if it is to be what it says it is.
North Carolina has played a critical role in this country's struggle for equal rights. Some people here have learned a lot about how to suppress other people's votes. But this state has also been home to visionaries like Pauli Murray, who figured out how to use the law to expand people's rights. Is democracy on a precipice right now? People would say so. And the time is ripe for some broad, Murray-esque thinking about democracy. Thanks for joining me for the Laura Flanders Show in North Carolina. I'm Laura. For more information on this special report deciding the fate of democracy in North Carolina, check out our episode notes posted at patreon.com/The LF Show. That post also includes a suggested reading list and links to our entire series on this topic, which includes reports from North Carolina's rural east on paramilitary training camps and the intimidation tactics of partisan sheriffs. Patreon.com/The LF Show is also where you'll find an invitation to watch the premiere of every week's episode on our YouTube channel and chat live in real time with me Sundays at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Time. All the details are at patreon.com/The LF Show. And please don't forget, it is not cheap or easy to report these stories from around the country. That's why you see a whole lot of people in the media who never leave their studios. We don't take ads or government money. Viewer and listener donations make this reporting possible and keep it free. If you appreciate the reporting and prefer to hear music rather than ads in the breaks, consider becoming a Patreon partner of the Laura Flanders Show. Our precious Patreon partners agree to donate whatever is comfortable for them. Will you join them? If you've been moved by our reporting or anything you've heard on our show, make a move now and become a member. And get a jump on our spring fundraiser that starts on May 15th. Go to patreon.com/The LF Show and become a monthly contributor. Or go to lauraflanders.org/donate for more ways to give. Thanks for listening. This show is produced by yours truly, Laura Flanders, along with Sabrina Artel, Nat Needham, David Newman, Rory O'Connor, Jeanette Hernandez, and Jeannie Harper. Major funding for this program is provided by the Novo, Park, Ellen Poss Family, Hisuku Wilson Foundations, the Schumann Media Center, Rising Fund at Tides, Kim Connor and Nick Groombridge, Jane Fonda, and listeners like you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for your ideas. Stay kind. Stay curious. Until the next time, I'm Laura.